नमस्कार। सबसे पहले मैं धन्यवाद प्रेषित करना चाहूँगा IPFA अथॉरिटी, मेरे ओन इंस्टीट्यूट इन द इंस्टीट्यूट ऑफ चार्टर्ड अकाउंटेंट ऑफ इंडिया एंड ज्ञान दर्शन चैनल कि उन्होंने मुझे ये अपॉर्चुनिटी दी कि मैं आज बहुत ही इम्पोर्टेंट विषय इक्विटी फॉर कैपिटल प्रोटेक्शन पर आप लोगों से चर्चा करने जा रहा हूँ। तो मैं समय की सीमितता को ध्यान में रखते आई वुड लाइक टू स्ट्रेट फॉरवर्डली कमिंग ऑन द टॉपिक and thank you the viewers for this deliberation on equity for capital protection. First, I will take you to the drive of meaning of equity. What is the equity? So equity is the owner's fund. Typically you can view the slide given here, and at the same time I would be deliberating on the what is written on the uh, slide, as well as I will try to be bilingual so that the viewers who are more comfortable in Hindi as well as in English, both will be benefited from this deliberation. So meaning of equity, most of you are aware that you must have heard about share capital, you must heard about punji, you must heard about the equity, you must have heard about the debt capital, debt equity, working capital. Sometimes while you are dealing with the banking sector, working capital, what is it, transaction capital, and there are various form and classifications of the capitals. तो सिंपल भाषा में अगर हम बात करें, सरल शुद्ध भाषा में बात करें, इक्विटी वो होती है जो स्वामी का पैसा होता है. द इक्विटी मीन्स द ओनर्स फंड. द ओनर्स फंड, ओनर्स का जो पैसा लगा होता है उसको हम इक्विटी फंड बोलते हैं. जब हम किसी छोटे से छोटे व्यवसाय की बात करें या हम किसी बिजनेस टाइकून की बात करें, बड़े कॉरपोरेट्स की बात करें, MNCs की बात करें, टू स्टार्ट एनी बिजनेस और वेंचर, स्टार्टअप और ए बिग कॉरपोरेट फर्म, कंपनी, प्रोड्यूसिंग यूनिट, सर्विस इंडस्ट्री, all of us are very well aware that it's required some funds in form of owners funds. It may be in form of loan, it may be form of bank funding. There are various source of funding. So the funds which are contributed by the owners, the promoters, is known as equity. So equity is the owner's fund contribution to that particular entity or venture. This is all about the equity. And equity, when we should deploy more equity, when we should deploy, if you flooded any of your business venture with your equity, and if it is in excess of that venture, of requirement of that venture, that is also harmful. If you deployed a certain amount of equity in any business and it is not as sufficient as it is required in the business, that is also not good for the taste of a business. Why? Let me give you an example. If suppose one industry required 100 crores of rupees and owner is having 150 crores of rupees and owner deployed all 150 crore rupees in that venture, so funds would be kept idle in that venture. Profitability of that institution or venture would go down because it is requiring 100 crore rupees and deployment of 150 crore rupees is excess capital. So it is not always good that you have surplus equity in the business. There is a mixed requirement of debt as well as equity, because this surplus money, the industrialist or the owner or the equity holder should have been deployed somewhere else. It may be in form of FDs. The FD may be given a handsome amount of interest, but if it is kept idle in that venture, I think it is not advisable. So we have to understand need of capital various source of capital, equity, what is equity, and what is debt. At the same time, if you are financed through some institutions or outsourced debt, the cost of that debt eaten up your profits. So we have to understand that how much amount of your equity is required, how much debt is required, what are the various sources, and that mechanism has to be devised by the wise entrepreneur. So, for benefit of the audience, I would read out the meaning of equity. Equity typically referred to as a shareholders' equity or owners' equity for private held companies represents the amount of money that would be returned to a company's shareholders if all of the assets were liquidated and all of the company debt were paid off in case of liquidation. In the case of acquisition, it is in the value of company sale minus any liability owned by the company not transferred with the sale. So let me give you it is a typical definition of in case of a company. I think most of you are aware the company is a artificial in person, and company will person comes and person goes, but company will remain. But there is a winding up procedure there in the Companies Act 2013 and earlier Companies Act 1956 and earlier also. Company can be wind up. So in case if the promoter deployed certain amount in form of equity in any institution, then at the end, which is called typically at the end of that venture, winding up of that venture, is called liquidation. In case of liquidation of that entity, the assets minus liabilities, after paying all the liabilities of that company, what remains with the company is paid to the equity shareholders in case of winding up. Let me give an example, very simple example. Suppose there are 100 shareholders in a company. The assets of a company is of rupees 1000 crore rupees, and the liabilities of that company is around 900 crores. So what remains? 100 crores rupees remain as a to be paid to the equity shareholders. So this is the equity. It will be divided as per shareholder 100 that's 100 crore divided by 100. So that way you can understand, because why equity is called equity shareholders called the owners of the venture, because the equity shareholders can take back their money only and only in case of liquidation of the company. So is the owner of the company who will take at the end, because first charge would be of the creditors, then banks, secured loans, then unsecured loans, and there is, because a lot of deliberation is required, a lot of time is required. I am not going to deepen in that subject, but I think I have given you a basic idea about the equity, what is the equity. So next we can discuss about next slide we can discuss about equity can found on a company's balance sheet, and one of the most common piece of data employed by analysis to assess of company's financial health. In a formula, if we described it, shareholders equity means total asset minus total liability, that I have already discussed with you. Meaning of capital, I have already discussed, but for the ease of facilitation of the viewers, I would like to reread it. Meaning of capital is ability to buy something for you. When we say capital protection, we mean protecting its purchasing power. Let me give you an example. The word, what is purchasing power? In my childhood, the desi ghee was available at the rate of rupees 25 per kg, and if I am not wrong, today it is 500 rupees per kg. So 25 rupees is equal to 500 rupees. This is the purchasing power. So now 500 rupees is having the same purchasing power that around 30 years back 25 rupees having. So we have to understand this, how to protect this capital. We have to understand this basic fact of purchasing power. Suppose I have that same 25 rupees today with me. There is an English saying, if you stop increasing, you are decreasing in economic era. So friends, when you don't protect your capital, if you don't invest wisely your capital, your funds, even if you remain with your quantum of that capital with you, the power of that capital reduced and you are at a loss. I think I have given a very practical example of that fact. Desi ghee 25 rupees 30 years back. That same quantity now you required 500 rupees in 30 years. A significant growth of 475 rupees in 30 years. If your 30 years back 25 rupees you are not able to turn it in 500 rupees, you forget about progress, you are decreased, your situation, your positioning would be down as you were at 30 years back. Hope you understand this fact. Now I will come on various sources of funding. There are two common ways that businessmen gather capital, whether it is found of the company to launch or to help the company through a growth period. Debt and equity are the source of fund of any business. I will not discuss about corporate. Economy is very similar to physics. Rules applicable for big units as well, for a small tiny business as well. Although I have described over the companies and somewhere, business is a business and source of fund is a source of fund. To run any business, as you are aware, we need some funds, and source of fund can be, broadly it may be two source of fund. One, owner's own capital, owner's own fund, that we have already described. It is typically it is called equity. The other source of fund is debt. यानी एक आप अपना पैसा और एक आप दूसरों से पैसा लेके कर रहे। बिजनेस को चलाने के लिए पैसा चाहिए, चाहे वो आपका हो चाहे दूसरों का हो. So there are two broadly source of fund. One is equity, another is debt. If I go deeper into equity,